right, here we go. Brigade and Glenn, thank you so much for that extra special session today. Beautiful, beautiful music as always. Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Oh, that was terrible. Anyways, the meeting is starting. And if anyone's looking outside, it is snowing. Oh, my Lord. Anyways, this is the Rotary Club of Toronto. I'm John Fortney, the club president, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our long-term members recognition Rotary meeting today. After the invocation and the recognition of the traditional lands, please stay tuned for the playing of the national anthem and the loyal toast. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of many Indigenous peoples who have walked and cared for this land for 15,000 years. They include the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the treaty peoples of the Mississaugas of the Credit. Let us take a moment to give thanks for all that we have been given and for being a member of this fine Rotary Club with its dedicated and enthusiastic members. We are proud of our club and its achievements, and it's an honor to be a member here. As we share our individual and collective gifts with our communities, let us give of ourselves in ways that make a difference to our families, to our city, to our country, and indeed the world. Let us not be distracted by political uncertainty, but maintain our focus with strength, determination, and a good sense of humor. Thank you. Now the national anthem. Please stand if you like. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the Queen. Please be seated. Thank you, Brigade and Glenn. Rotarians and guests, it is now my pleasure to introduce our head table. I am pleased to have the following people with me today. Brian Westlake, Rotarian since 1977, that's 44 years. Former classification, law, corporate. He is a partner emeritus at Blake, Castles, and Graydon. He is a past club president and is our MC for today's special Rotary meeting. Michael Morgan, Rotarian since 1971, 50 years. Former classification, investments, real estate. He is a club past president and is one of our speakers for today. Susan Howson, Rotarian since 1991, 30 years. Classification, investment dealer. Susan is a director and senior vice president with Research Capital Corp., a Club Foundation past president, and is also a speaker for today. Don Bell, a Rotarian since 1980, 41 years. Former classification, industrial market research. Don is a club past president and is another of our speakers for today. Michelle Guy, Rotarian since 1991, 30 years. Classification, law, practice, general. Michelle is a lawyer and partner with Coots Crane, a club past president, and our final speaker for today. Ladies and gentlemen, our head table. For virtual meetings, we do not have an official monitor to introduce visiting Rotarians and guests, so I will do it today. To our Visiting Rotarians, thank you for choosing our club for your makeup. We hope that you enjoy today's meeting. To all of our guests, welcome to our virtual meeting today. Please feel free to contact the office and find out how you may be able to make a difference by joining us. Rotarians, please welcome our visitors in the tradition of our great club. Announcements. You may already know this, but in case you do not, you should be aware that at these virtual Rotary meetings, that if you have your video camera on, that you may show up on the YouTube or the Google Meet recordings or the live streaming. We ask that when you have your camera on, you present a professional image, have your lunch earlier, please, and be aware of what is going on in the background when your camera is on. If you do not want to appear, please turn off your video. We will not be able to edit you out later. On a second note, we've noticed that people are being accidentally removed from the meetings. If you click on a person's picture during Google Meet, you may accidentally remove them from the meeting if you're not careful. Please refrain from doing this. Thank you. The genesis of today's lunch began last fall when I had a conversation with Margot Morgan. I had called Michael for some information, and Margot answered the phone, and we had a really nice chat. We have not spoken for years. Margot mentioned that Michael will be 50 years in Rotary this June and 90 this past February. This is when a light bulb went off in my head. They're always flashing up there, as you guys know. I passed the idea of a lunch to recognize longtime members by Carol, Prince, and Jay, and they loved it. So I proposed the idea to program committee. A team was struck, a proposal made, of course, the requisite event form was completed. The team came up with a great program, including lunches for our honorees, spoke to Onville, set a budget, and it flew through executive committee and the board. Everyone loved the idea. I was so excited, and I really wanted this to happen. We have not recognized long-term members since our centennial years. I think that's like 12 years ago. I especially want to recognize our 3 members who have been contributing to this club for 50 years or more. Jim Bell, Michael Morgan, and Ken Andres. Congratulations and thank you. I hope you enjoy today's program, especially long-term members to whom we are so indebted. It is now my pleasure to turn the agenda over to past President Brian Westlake, our MC for the rest of the meeting. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you, President John. And we do have some wonderful slides put together for those that are just joining the meeting. The Marine is assembled. And if they could come up on the screen while we're making some introductory comments. As Neil Phillips said in the chat, it's nice to see that some of our longstanding members are still using the photograph that they had when they joined the club 25 or more years ago. I would like to thank the club for the opportunity today to get together to honor the long-serving members and for the delicious lunch that was provided to us by the club and for Enville's catering of that and to the member recognition committee for putting this luncheon together. Thank you very much. I too would like to pay special tribute to our long-serving 50-year members, Jim Bell, Michael Morgan, and Ken Andres. As President John remarked, this is the first celebration in recent years to honor longstanding members. We used to have an annual recognition lunch for 25-year members at the Royal York when Edgar Goodare, 50 years of service to the club as our pianist, would march the honorees into the tune of The Old Gray Mare. She ain't what she used to be. And there were special tables set aside for the 25-year members. And there were plenty back in the day. Now we're having a virtual meeting in pandemic times, but we look forward to getting back to in-person meetings. We have 4 speakers to share some anecdotes of their experience with the club today. And if you have any questions, you could post them in the chat, and we'll attempt to answer them at the end of the meeting as time permits. I would like first to call on Michael Morgan, who we've just heard will be celebrating 50 years with the club on June the 4th. Over to you, Michael.
Well, thank you, Brian. Fellow Rotarians, looking back over the years, there are 2 projects that I've had the good fortune to be a part of. They were both capital intensive, and it's fair to say that without the considerable support from our foundation and the involvement of many of our members, they might not ever have happened. The first was the West End Creche, a state-of-the-art facility providing outpatient therapy for emotionally disturbed preschool children, but housed in a decrepit old building which was built for them back in 1906. It clearly needed replacement or renovation and expansion. I had served on our board, the club board, during the years 1979 to 81, and knew that we were looking for a new signature project. A friend of ours was on the West End Creche board and suggested that the two organizations get together to do something about their building, which we did. Our board of directors decreed that the foundation's donation be augmented by a club-wide fundraising program, and Peter Hermant, a former member of our club, agreed to head this up. Peter had close ties with the National Ballet of Canada and persuaded them that we co-sponsor their upcoming production of The Merry Widow at the O'Keefe Centre. Do you remember the O'Keefe Centre? And our campaign was built around this, and the opening of the show was really quite something. We also bought an existing building on College Street near the University Avenue Hospitals and the U of T. We were planning to renovate it and sell the old West End building, but a newly appointed executive director, Ruth DaCosta of Covenant House fame, some will remember her, would have no part of it. So we ended up renovating and expanding the old building and selling the new one for a tidy profit. Not a bad way to boost a fundraising campaign. In 1990, I chaired the West End Creche board together with 3 fellow Rotarians. West End Creche subsequently merged with another organization in the same field, the Earl's Court Child and Family Clinic, and they formed the Child Development Institute, which is still going strong today, doing wonderful work, and our lovely West End building is still their head office. Another project that I'm proud to have been a part of is the Pine River Institute, which is a long-term residential treatment facility for seriously addicted teenagers. With considerable help from our foundation, we took this one on from scratch, in partnership with Karen Mendon and Harvey Shipper, the husband and wife team, who had a particular passion for helping these unfortunate youngsters. Some of you will remember Andre Casabon. She was the youngster who had lived on the streets of Toronto as an addict, and having had the benefit of treatment in a long-term Utah-based facility in the United States, had become a filmmaker here in Toronto. We collaborated closely with her to produce her acclaimed movie, Letters to a Street Child, which was premiered at the Royal Ontario Museum in 1999. Her dream, though, was to create a treatment facility here in Southern Ontario, like the one from which she had previously graduated in the state of Utah. There was nothing like it in Canada, so it was Andre who introduced me to Karen and Harvey. To get the ball rolling at our end, we formed the Rotary Club of Toronto Letters to a Street Child Task Force, which later persuaded our board of directors to make a significant donation. Through the efforts of Walter Thompson, a deceased member of our club, the Tippett Foundation also came on board with a donation. 4 of us from the task force subsequently created the Pine River Board of Directors, which, of course, also included Karen and Harvey. The board was chaired by Ron Crane, a former member of this club. I knew the Dean of St. James Cathedral, Doug Stout, who agreed to let us use their Sunday school room as our first head office. It came complete with tiny chairs and a tiny table used by the children on Sundays. Certainly for us, a fairly unique boardroom table. In Winnipeg, Karen found a person, Doris May Olton, who was recognized internationally as a specialist in our field, and she would fly in once a month to give us guidance. We were lucky enough to rent and later to buy a closed-down Toronto District School Board property, about an hour and a half drive north of Toronto. It came with a purpose-built building, which had to be adapted for our use, of course, and 200 acres of lovely land. We also established a wilderness facility in Algonquin Park, where the kids to this day spend the first 6 weeks of their treatment. The Ontario government was eventually persuaded to fund 30 of our 36 beds on an ongoing basis, and the remainder were paid for privately or through bursaries. We opened the doors in 2006, and again, with the help of our foundation, we are presently in the process of completing a second building, which will double our capacity. A final word about Andre Casabon. As a movie maker, she subsequently changed her focus to the plight of Indigenous communities in Northern Ontario and worked with us, our Rotary Club, during the early days of our interest in this field. She famously would say that the Rotary Club of Toronto was like the mafia. If you want something done, they'll make it happen. So that, my fellow mafiosos, is my story. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Michael, and for the amusing end of your story. It's wonderful to walk down memory lane. I remember these projects very well. And in fact, you were one of my early introductions to Rotary. You were chair of what was then called the Crippled Children's Committee. I joined as an assistant secretary, and I learned you could advance quickly in Rotary if you wish to do so. I think I was the chairman next year. So much for Rotary and volunteers. Our next speaker is Susan Housen. Susan, over to you.
Thank you, Past President Brian. Did you know that the Rotary Club of Toronto has had a camp weekend since 1946? Originally at the Easter Seals camp of Blue Mountain, when it had closed, there was a search for another camp where we would continue the tradition of sweat equity and fellowship. After a full start, Kenny Andres discovered Lake Scugog Camp. I think it was around 2005, and we were shocked at the state of the buildings and the kitchen. There was nearly a walkout. Scugog was one of the original fresh air camps started in the 30s for women and children to provide a respite for inner city poverty, and not much maintenance had been done over the years. My experience with camp started in 1992. Camp was something that my father did not do, thus going to camp served a few purposes: not to be under my father's shadow, and a break from my husband and 2- and 3-year-old children. That year, I and 5 other women went to camp, led by the indomitable Pauline Hill. I had no idea how to paint and a vague idea about screwdrivers. Yes, there were some who were not happy about us being there, but many who welcomed us, and I was hooked. As the club has changed, so has the camp weekend. Rotarians now do more than paint. We fix screens and rotten decks, build docks, and replace walls. To keep energy levels up to their keep our energy levels up. The chefs make amazing meals, catering to various allergies and food needs. And the chefs are happy to share any of their cooking knowledge. We have also helped the camp grow by assisting with achieving a charitable status, showing them how to fundraise and funding improvements to their facilities. Today, Toronto Rotaractors are now included, and any member of the Rotary Club of Toronto is welcome to this Sweat Equity Executive Retreat weekend. It's a tradition that has been built on the core of being a Rotarian, assisting those in need, fellowship and friendship, business networking, and skills training. I've found that anyone who comes to camp stays in Rotary, so I hope to see you next May 27th, 2022, to help us carry on the great tradition. And I can assure you, we have never had snow, rain, but never snow. Over to you, President Brian. Past President Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. As you well know, I've been a participant for many years at Camp Scugog, and before that, Blue Mountain Camp in particular, which was a marvelous tie between the Rotary Club and what became Easter Seal Society. We had an important role to play in the development of that. The lands for Blue Mountain Camp were donated by a Rotarian, Gordon Leach, who had Upper Lake Shipping, and he used to take children out in wheelchairs on those flat top grain boats that floated on Georgian Bay and Lake Huron. It was quite a wonderful start to that camp. Our next speaker today is past President Don Bell. Over to you, Don.
Thank you, Brian. Susan, we never had snow, but we certainly had clouds of mosquitoes. Wanted to talk about women in Rotary. 34 years ago, on June the 12th, 1987, Ron Crane, one of our past presidents, made a Friday speech, and the topic was women in Rotary. Now, some American clubs had received applications from women, but this was contrary to the Rotary International Convention. And so things were in flux, but people were wishing to make a change. Ron's speech was pretty lighthearted. The thrust was that membership should not be granted on the basis of sex. Another past president, a couple of weeks later, in The Voice wrote that there were no objects of Rotary that could not be carried out by women as well as men, and that this problem must be solved under our four-way test. Is it fair to all concerned? Well, as you can imagine, this was highly controversial. And we decided, actually the president decided, Rory Phillips, that we ought to have a questionnaire. So he came to me because I was in the research business and said, put this thing together and let's see what people think. So I designed it and sent it out, and he put a note at the very end of the questionnaire that said, you don't have to sign this. That was the kind of thinking that went on. In any event, a lot of heated discussion during the summer, and around the lunch tables at Friday meetings. You know, it's a very good thing. No, it changes the nature of the club. What will our wives say? What will we talk about at the lunch table? How many members are going to resign? It'll be the end of Rotary. So the board received the results of the survey in September, and I presented the results along with Ron to the membership on October the 16th, and they were positive for women. But there was a lot of people saying, oh, this is a bad idea. So the president and the board decided we'll have a secret ballot, which they did on October the 23rd. And we got the results. The results had to be in by November the 6th. And 80% of respondents said, we need to have women. 20%, the diehards said no. But most of the club members voted. We had about 350 members then, and most people voted. So as of February the 29th, 1988, the club's constitution was changed, altered, so that members would be considered regardless of gender. And after all the talk and hullabaloo, only one member quit, and he quietly rejoined the club a year later. And on June the 10th, 1988, fully a year after Ron made the original presentation to the club, application for membership was received from Pauline Hill, the chairperson for Welcome Wagon Canada, our first female member, and we've never looked back. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Don. I remember these days very well, and thanks to the foresight of Ron Crane, people like yourself, we went ahead with this. I never resisted the idea at all, and I've said many times since that if we hadn't made that decision, I doubt that the Rotary Club of Toronto would exist today. The women are the core strength of the club, and if you want work to be done well, you look to our female counterparts in the club. They've made a wonderful contribution over the years. And Pauline Hill couldn't have been a better choice as an exemplar for our first woman member. And we do have another person who's special in that regard, our first female president, Michelle Guy, our next speaker.
Good afternoon. So, I say to the guy that proposes me, I just don't think I can do this anymore. I just don't think I can go. I'm going to leave. So my proposer, Robert O'Brien, says, no, go to one more lunch. I say, okay, I'll give it a try. I go to the lunch, and I'm sitting there, and some guy sitting at my table, and somebody asks him a question, and he gives a smart aleck response. I look over, oh, look, there is somebody that's like me. You see, luckily, I come from a long line of Rotarians in my company who have been part of Rotary, like so many other companies that we've had over the years. Toronto Dominion Bank, Blake Castles, KPMG, Bosley Real Estate, Mackey Research, of course, and Morguard, and so many other companies have spawned so many Rotarians for our club, long lines of Rotarians for our club. Well, the light came on for me when I was volunteering for Rotary. We were going to run a beer tent at some charity event. No surprise there. In the early morning, I'm driving there and I decide to pick up some donuts. I show up and the guys all say to me, Michelle, you got it. You now have joined the What Can I Do to Help Club. And that's what we Rotarians, Rotary Club of Toronto people, that's what we do. We help. We help. We help at their children's Christmas party. We help at the at Scugog. We help at the Women's Initiative Committee or the golf tournament. We at the Environment Committee. We go to the district conference. We go to the international convention all over the world, and we help. And we learn. We learn so many things that our daily life or our day jobs don't even give to us. So how to manage volunteers that are not employees. How do you get someone to sign up to do some help when they're already so busy? Or how do you stand on the podium and speak to 100 people who are all staring at you? As many of you may be aware, I had never done any public speaking before I joined Rotary. Some of you think I probably still haven't learned how to do public speaking. So here I am. So then I get this wonderful, beautiful offer to be president of this fantastic club. I'm doing my first meeting. I'm standing at the podium. My knees are shaking. I'm gripping onto the lectern, so for dear life. I run the meeting. I take one last breath at the end. I announce the meeting's over. I step back, and on my right is my ex-friend, Bert Steenberg. And he says, I don't know what you're smiling about. You did a terrible job. You were just awful. On my left is his friend, Salim Qasim. I say to Salim, did you just hear what Bert said to me? He said, I did a terrible job. I said, why are you friends with him? Salim looked at him, looked at me, and said, 2 words, it's safer. We had a fantastic laugh, and that was the best thing the two of them could have done for me. So in the process of helping people, we Rotarians, as we work together, we make the best damn friends that you're ever going to make in your whole life. If I could, I would rejoin this club and do it all over again. Thank you. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Michelle. Your inspirational comments come well at the end of your presentation, and address this to the newer members of our club. When you're given the opportunity, as you will be, to serve on committees, committee chairs, on the board, and for a select few, if you have the opportunity to be president, I, like Michelle, was looking for reasons why I could turn down the opportunity, but it proved to be one of the best opportunities of my life. Trying to juggle the workload of both a full law practice in those days and being president of the club required organizational skills that actually helped me in the rest of my practice. And like Michelle, had never done any public speaking. To stand up in front of meetings every week certainly helps you. It's like a specialty course in how to improve your skills by being in that role with the club and serving in various capacities. reflect back to days when things went wrong as president of the club. The one that stands out most in my mind, and this would be in 1990, we had a peace conference in Toronto with more than 300 Rotarians from all around the world. At that time, one of the greatest concerns that everyone had was the state of the Cold War with Russia. I mean, it was still a concern, the number of nuclear weapons that were around, and that was the topic of the day. And Rotary had peace seminars, summit meetings around the world on that subject. And we had a special speaker from the U.S., a very prominent guy in disarmament. And at the same meeting, we happened to have the ambassador from Barbados as one of our guests at the club. And Tony Santamora, who was a Rotarian at Toronto, England, had said, "Oh, could we put the ambassador at the head table, a special person?" I said, "Well, that would be nice, I guess." And then the ambassador said, "Well, could I say a word or two of greetings from Barbados?" "Oh, yes, I suppose you're the ambassador. Please get up and say." 15 minutes later, I was up physically pulling him away from the podium so I could get our main speaker. I had halfway through the main speaker's comments to stop the meeting and say, "Those that have to leave now for other meetings, please do." But our speaker has kindly agreed to continue on with the subject matter of the peace conference that we're holding in Toronto. So it doesn't always work out according to plan, but these things are character building. Thank you. We seem to have a minute or two. Do any of our presenters want to add anything to their previous presentation? If not, if we have questions in the chat, President John was going to monitor that to see if anything comes up, or he may have some questions himself. But I turn it back to our speakers. Anything to add? Or if not, back to President John.
Thank you very much. I think before I go any further, first I want to thank Brian, Michael, Susan, Don, and Michelle. But I do believe there's also a slide presentation we'd like to see. Prince, please. I do have one question in the chat from past President Robert O'Brien for our panel. And the question is, what do you see for the next quarter century for our club? Anyone want to take that?
Let me start, President John, and then I'll maybe ask one of the younger members like Michelle maybe to say a word or two. But the core values of Rotary will remain, and they're essential. The four-way test exemplifies that it stood the test for 100 years, and it'll continue on. What has changed are the pressures or the way in which people engage, social media and other things. COVID, in its odd sort of way, has done us a favor by forcing us to look at a different format for meetings. So I think we've adapted quite well. I think the future will hold hybrid meetings where there'll be in-person meetings as soon as we can get back to the National Club or the Royal York. But I think there'll be a component like this meeting, and there'll younger people are more attuned to social media and will want to join in other ways. I'll turn it over to younger member, Michelle, to comment.
I think, I don't know. I think it will carry on basically the way it is. Yeah, there'll be some, I think the younger people will bring in the new ideas, but the giving of service is the giving of service. I mean, it doesn't change that much, in my opinion. That's all I have to say.
Any of our other panelists like to kick in on that? Susan, do you have what
Brian,
you'd like to share?
I would make a comment that originally the club was based a business-based club. That was why it was started in 1912 or 1905. Now it's a socially oriented base. There's a big difference between the attitude of the people that joined when I first joined, and my dad, and the attitude that the new members have. And the new members are socially oriented, and that is just a different frame of mind, and that I think will continue for quite a long time. It still is the four-way test, but it's a different mindset.
Thank you. Susan, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think Michael had a point there. Go ahead, Michael.
Michael, thank you.
Sorry, not exactly the younger set responding here, but I've been impressed at conferences and that sort of thing, and reading the Rotarian with the e-clubs. We're becoming increasingly globalized in this world these days. And I've been enormously impressed how e-clubs have been formed with members from different parts of the world, different countries, different parts of the world, all putting their talents together for the good of their communities and for the good of the world as a general. So I think there'll be a growth of those e-clubs, if that's what they're called.
Yes, on that point, our speaker 2 weeks ago, Sarwar Kashmiri, spoke to us from New Hampshire, made possible by current circumstances. Susan, something to add?
I think, as Michelle said, it's the four-way test is there, the business aspect is there, and part of the reasons why I joined was for the social interaction, to build new friends. Yeah, get clients. That's always there in the background, but also to give back. And as it has been said, it was started as a business club, because Paul Harris was living in a new town and he needed to meet people and he wanted to expand his business, but he also just wanted to find and meet new people who could help him with his business. And as Michelle said in her speech, we've learned a lot. Standing at that podium for the first time when you're running a meeting and hoping you do not have a situation like Brian had, and doing all that sort of things, running a committee, fundraising, being involved in stuff. There's so much stuff that you can learn that you can't learn at work. And the building of friendships is very important. Those things will stay. There will be a hybrid, and again, having meetings where we're in person, I think are very, very important. but also being accessible through social media, etc., will help us build. And I think we will just continue to keep on building. We've shown we can do change.
Thank you for that, Susan. Just, we seem to have a moment on the clock here. An anecdote of how did I become a member of the Rotary Club of Toronto? I didn't have direct family connections as some of our members did. I had an uncle in Montreal who was a Rotarian, and I was at university but contemplating going into law. But I didn't know anything about law at all. My uncle in Montreal said, well, the Rotary Club of Toronto probably has a vocational committee that would talk to you about law as a career. I called up Don McKinnon, who was then the executive director. He said, well, we don't have that, but leave it with me and I'll get back to you. And then I got a call. You'll meet our member Norman Simpson at the National Club for lunch on such and such a day. I met with him, knees shaking, never been in the National Club, hadn't been to law school, learned something from him about the practice of law. To move the camera forward, I later became, at Norm's invitation, a member of the Rotary Club of Toronto. I became his partner at Blake Castles. I became a member of the National Club. And all of those things arose out of the fact that I called the Rotary Club of Toronto to see if they could help me be guided into the career of law, and spent the next 50 years practicing law. So it can be life-changing, just small things along the way, and we're all capable of doing that for other people. Over to you, President John.
Thank you, Brian. I have a question. Was anybody around when Uncle Watt rode his horse into the Imperial Room?
I was not, and well, Michael would be the most senior member here. I think it was before your time, wasn't it, Michael?
Brian, it was indeed. I mean, it was legendary then as it is now. But no, I certainly wasn't.
But
I think it was in the 1950s, but it was a great story.
If we can pick up on that, affectionately known as Uncle Watt McLean, and his picture is in the Rotary office on the wall. He left the legacy of his estate to our club, and it became the core of what became the Laughlin Centre money. And the Laughlin Centre, as you know, was the largest single project ever undertaken by a Rotary Club. When the Rotary Laughlin Centre, as it was then known, was built in downtown Toronto as a seniors' residence, it eventually outlived its purposes. And some of that money from the sale of the land reverted to our club and forms the core of the Senior Citizens Fund, the Laughlin Fund, within the foundation. There's more than $3 million in that part of our foundation dedicated to seniors. And that all rose out of the gift of Uncle Watt McLean, who famously rode a white horse into the Canadian Room at the Royal York Hotel.
Amazing. I am just having a great time. I hope everyone else is. I hope everyone's enjoyed today's program. I want to thank Brian Westlake for his eloquent role as MC, and to the wonderful speakers, Michael Morgan. And Michael, my joining date is June the 4th as well. And next week I will be 22 years in the club. And you were the one who interviewed me to join the club. Susan Howson, Don Bell, and Michelle Guy, thank you. I also want to thank the Long-Term Members Recognition Committee, Steve Smith, Nestle Eugene, and Randy Gunn of the Program Committee. It couldn't have been done. I couldn't have done it better myself, to be honest. And of course, none of this would have come together without the indefatigable Maureen Bird and Carol Hutchison. And of course, Enville. I wish I knew where I was going to be exactly, because that menu looked amazing. I'm dying that I can't have it, but I'm hoping everyone enjoyed it. And as always, Enville comes through, I'm telling you. I remember the years I spent as chair of youth and children. I had a powerhouse of Rotarians, and Michael Morgan was one of them, and watching them in action was absolutely awe-inspiring. We didn't just give out money. We advised, we sat on other charity boards, we guided, we introduced like-minded causes together, we suggested better ways of doing things. It was an orchestra of philanthropy. And that was just one committee. This is our history. There's so much more. We all need to revel in it and to know it. Be proud of what we have done, and it will empower us to continue to do great things. To our senior members, I cannot say it enough. Thank you. I think that will be my thought for the day. Enjoy the snow. Our next Rotary meeting will be Friday, June the 4th, and our guest speaker will be Dr. Eileen Davila. Oh, and I know Michelle will call on that. And she will be speaking about present COVID situation and the future. I think this will be one to bring guests to. Following the guest speaker next week, we will also be having a special members-only meeting for the approval of the new bylaw and for the appointment of the auditors for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022. Please watch for emails for information on these two items. Please feel free to invite guests because it's going to be an amazing lunch. Share the links to connect. However, have them contact the office in order to be admitted to the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for attending the meeting today. We had a huge attendance today, of course. And the meeting is adjourned. Have a great weekend, everybody.